Hi, in this video I'd like to talk about art materials. If you're thinking about learning to paint and you're not sure what to buy, then I'm just going to go through the basic kind of materials that you'll need. So of course, number one on there would be a canvas. So you could get one of these quite cheaply from your local art store, probably about £10. But maybe when you're beginning to get something smaller, because you don't want to give yourself too much to do when you're learning to paint, because it will seem complicated at first when you're thinking about mixing colours and drawing out and blending. So maybe get a cheap canvas, but something a bit smaller. And then of course the next question is where you're going to put this. If you can't afford an easel, you could put it on a desk or work surface. But then if it's lying flat like that, you've got to be careful about your lighting, because oil paints are very reflective, obviously because of the oil in them. And if you're looking down on it, you could get a lot of glare coming back and it'd be hard to see it. But you'll kind of work those things out as you go along. You could even start on something smaller than this, that would be easy to go on your desk. And that would be one of these, which is a canvas board. So really good for practicing painting. And you can get these in like a book. I think you get 10 in a book. And they just kind of fold out like that, and you just tear them off. And I've done quite a few demonstrations, painting demonstrations on these by sticking it onto this board that's on my easel. Next question is, where are you going to mix your paints? So you've got your canvas, whether it's on a table or you've got an easel. You're going to need somewhere to mix your paints. So you can get disposable palettes as well, little tear-off palettes. They come in like a book. You know, you get 30, maybe 60 sheets in a book. But I've used this for years, this wooden palette. So of course you can put your colours around from the tube and then mix your colours in the middle, but there's not a lot of room on here. So often I will, if I'm doing say a portrait, I'll show you a glass palette in a minute. I would mix my colours upon a glass palette. Benefits of that is easy to clean the glass, and because it's not porous surface, the paint stays wetter longer, more usable longer. So I would often mix my steps up if I'm painting a portrait, say from dark to light tones, and I'd have dark to light going around here. And on the outside, I would have, you know, the colours from the tube, titanium white, cadmium yellow, pale, alizarin crimson, etc. around there. And then of course you'll need medium, paint medium if you've got these, so you can get these little dippers. But in these dippers I put odourless mineral spirits in that, and maybe linseed oil in there. Then of course, if you do want to have a palette to hold, whether it's disposable, tear-off ones or this, you're going to need some blue roll or kitchen towel or something to wipe your brushes on. So I tend to use this blue roll, which you can get from local sort of DIY store. So you generally get 6 in a pack, and that'll last me for ages. So I'll clean my brushes with that, clean down at the end of the painting day with these. Also you're going to be needing your brushes, which you'll hold like this, you know, grabbing your paint off and put it onto the canvas. I'll show you the brushes in a minute, and but before we do that, let's have a look at what paints we're going to be using. Okay, so these are the 5 colours that are really good to start off with, limited palette. So you've got titanium white, cadmium yellow. You can also use cadmium yellow pale, but I'm a bit low on that, so I just use cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. And of course this is a glass palette that I've had for a long time to use to mix my colours upon. You could get some less expensive paints. I mean, I really like Michael Harding paints and the Winsor & Newton artist oil colours. But you could, Winsor & Newton do a more cheaper brand, Winton colours. So you could get the same in Winton. Okay, so you're probably thinking, oh, where's the black? But when I started learning to paint, I used to watch videos and read books. And there's a really good artist called Mark Carder, and I got his DVD on how to paint still life paintings. And it was these colours that Mark uses, still uses. I think he's changed that to a Pyrrole Rubine, the alizarin crimson. Yeah, I followed Mark's DVD and learnt to mix colours. And also Mark simplifies it by, instead of saying titanium white, cadmium yellow, he would just say white, yellow, red, blue, brown. Okay, so the first thing you'd be thinking is, how do you get a black? Well, that's really easy. You just take some burnt umber and some ultramarine blue and mix those together. And you can adjust the black to how blue or brown you want it. So if you want a warm black, you would add more burnt umber. You can see you can get a nice kind of velvety black colour just by mixing those together. And of course, if you want kind of orangey colour, you could mix the yellow and the red, get a nice orange. Nice green, obviously it's the yellow and the blue. There you go, so nice addition to your colours there by mixing those together. And of course, opposite to yellow on the colour wheel is purple, so you could mix a nice purple if you wanted to, a bit of red and blue. I don't get sponsored by Rosemary Brushes, but just to let you know, I buy these off Rosemary Brushes. Other artists that I've watched use them, so I've buying them quite a long time now, so they make really good brushes. So these ones are the ivory synthetic ones. So if you'd prefer to use synthetic, these are fantastic. You could do the whole painting from the underpainting to the second painting in these. Really good. You can also use the edges of these if you're doing painting straight edges. So it's just a bit more flexible, it can hold a bit more paint. Better for doing more longer kind of brush strokes. This is a filbert, so it's kind of curved around the edges. So quite good for if you're painting, say, a portrait, and if you're painting around the eyes, somewhere there's more shapes to the area you're painting. These are good for getting into those shapes. I use these brushes quite a lot, really. These small ones for doing details around the eyes and mouths. These ones are the sables, so these are a bit more expensive, but really soft, but also firm. So you don't want a brush that gives way when you put pressure on it. So these are still firm, but they're softer, and they're really good at holding paint. That's more of a pointed brush. Say if I was painting an eye and I was painting the pupil or around those eyelashes or intricate areas, I'd be using something like this. I use these quite a lot just for on areas where there's not too much detail. Yeah, it's a flat brush, but good for doing, like, say, flat areas. These are like rigger brushes, so these are really good for doing painting, say, hair, strands of hair, and also for getting in more detail-y areas, but really good, especially around the hair for doing those details. These quite good for blending, nice and soft, and also for doing, instead of the finer hair strands, doing more larger parts of the hair, so they're good for doing that. If you go to your art store and you're looking at brushes, what you need to check is that they have a good spring to them and that the bend is more in the center. You see how that bends from the center of the hairs. Nice and springy. So if you're looking at brushes, kind of just try that, or try it on your hand to see the, you know, the give in them. So you want something kind of like that. This tape measures up in my studio, but a really vibrant green, so I'm not sure if I can match that, but I'll give it a go. So make a green up. Bit more blue. No, so that's the limitations of using I knew it wouldn't hit that colour anyway, but just want to show you the limitations that if you're looking at something to paint and you're going to use only 5 colours, try to start off with something that's a bit more muted or natural kind of colour, not something as vibrant as, say, this green. Okay, let's try and match this blue vase. Would make it too blue, if you can see that. Let's put that there. Burnt umber is part of orange family, so I'm going to tone it down with a bit of burnt umber. Yeah, you see how kind of close that is now? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to mix the red for this apple. So it's not a really strong red like a cadmium red, so see if we can do it using the alizarin crimson and maybe a bit of other colours. So let's have a look at that red compared with the apple. I could darken it a little bit. There you go. Yeah, that was pretty straightforward. I'm being a bit cautious with the white because it can just kill the colour, so and just we can see, you know, I've killed the red, you know, colour completely to go to this side, so and that was really easy. Just took the red, mix the opposite in green, tone the red down in it, and then just tweaked around with it to get to that colour. You can see it's getting there, you know, because you can see the greeniness in the skin of the banana. A bit more yellow. It's kind of a little bit of black into it. And a little bit of orange just to counter the blue that's mixed in to make the black. So you're kind of getting more to that bruisey or the darker brownie side of that banana. So I'm going to paint this on because it's hard for me to see holding. This probably might be way too dark. That's not too bad. So I'll just use my brush to bit of yellow, a bit more red. Yeah, that slight area there, you can see it kind of changes all over from cool, wooden, you know, it's obviously wood, so it's the wood's kind of cool there and it goes warmer in the shadowy areas. So that's in a bit more shadowy area, so that's a bit warmer. Not far off, a little bit too light, so a little bit of burnt umber or brown, a little bit more red, just to darken it down a little bit. Yeah, you can see there that more or less hit it, but you can, doesn't have to be totally exact, but you can tweak around with it. So if you have a laminator, it's quite good to get your photos, laminate them, and you can just check straight onto the photograph when you're matching your colours. You can use these to wipe paint off on your canvas. These makeup sponges are quite good because it's chiseled, so say if I was painting around somebody's eye and it kind of wasn't quite right, I could, use a corner or wipe off a more bigger area using this. Also, these are really handy if you're mixing up some colours, say for a portrait, you want to go from the darks to the lights. As you're mixing up your values, your steps, and you can see that's lighter than 7. So it's going to be more like a 6. And mediums that you can use. Well, I quite often use a cold pressed linseed oil. I like it because it's very kind of runny, so it makes paints really easy to move around. You could use a stand oil, which is, a lot of artists really like using that because it's really good. It produces a really good film on your paints, and it's flexible, and it's one of the best mediums you can use. But you would need to thin this down with some odorless mineral spirits to make it a bit more usable, say 50% this and 50% mineral spirits. These are the odorless mineral spirits. I use, these or Winsor & Newton, whatever, when I'm ordering, whatever's available. So that's really good for if you're doing a painting that's in layers. You don't really want to use any oil on your underpainting or your first layer. So if you needed to make your paints a little bit more easier to use, you could mix a bit of this with them, because this will evaporate out of the paints, and it's good for cleaning brushes. If you don't have much time to paint and it's going to be hard for you to mix your steps of paint up and keep them working because keep them movable because you're in work maybe 5 days in the week, you might want to consider using something like liquid, which I use sometimes, and your paint will be dry in a day there, so you're not going to work worrying about your paint's drying up on you, and you're not going to have time, so you're just going to paint it in sections, really, in stages, I should say. Other things to consider are getting some empty paint tubes and pre-mixing some colours. So this is a cool skin tone, which will complement a warmer skin tone at the same value. That's kind of a shadow colour pre-mixed. So, if I want to, it's good to pre-mix, because if you're working on painting, you don't want to keep stopping and mixing every kind of colour that you want. So if I'm using that for the shadow side, I'm just going to have that in the tube ready to go when I need some more. And you can get these tubes, order them off the internet, and usually get a pack of 6. So you'll need a canvas or a canvas board, an easel if you can't afford an easel, maybe somewhere like a working bench or somewhere that you're not going to mess up if you get paint on it. Somewhere flat where you can put your canvas down, but then you've got to think about your lighting, which you'll find out when you're painting. You might have to move it around a little bit. Then your paints to get you going. You've got the 5 colours: titanium white, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, burnt umber. You might need a palette knife to mix your colours up. Brushes, so flat brushes, fine brushes for detail, filberts, so you can get into those little shapes around somebody's face if you're painting those areas. Bigger brushes for doing bigger areas, or the hair, especially if you're doing the hair, brushes with longer heads on them, so you can get more of a nice brush stroke coming down. Sponges, little makeup sponges for cleaning and wiping off paint where you've made a mistake or you don't want it there anymore, for oiling out. You could get a glass palette made up. I had a local glass company make this for me, and they ground the edges down and took the sharp corners off, so there's nothing sharp on there. And then I painted it a nice kind of medium tone underneath. And of course my trusty little palette, which I should get a new one because this is well used, but it's I'll probably get one a little bit bigger because it's a bit too small. But if I'm painting for a long time, my arms get a bit tired with a bigger one, but I could do with maybe a medium sized one. Paint dippers, pots to put your oil in and your odorless mineral spirits. If you can see the orange there, the reason I didn't mix up colours for the orange one was because these colours, like with that tape measure, these won't hit that orange. So when I painted that, I used cadmium orange mixed with these to get the right colour for that. So I think that's everything you need really. And studio lights, I use 5000K or daylight bulbs just to keep the light nice and balanced, so it's not too yellow. So yeah, daylight bulbs. Got my little table here for mixing up on. Keep my paints on here, mediums if I need them, my brushes. Got my easel next to me. So if you're watching my painting demonstrations, I'm coming down here sometimes, checking, tweaking around with colours, putting them onto my wooden palette, coming back to the easel and painting away. And I usually edit those parts out of the videos, so it'd be a bit boring with all those long delays. So hopefully I can get another camera soon and have one maybe aiming down at the palette, so you can see me mixing and then see me from another angle putting the paint onto the canvas. If you're working from a photograph, well, these kind of things always come in handy, especially if you kind of haven't got the size, there's something not quite right with a person's eye, so you can check from the photograph to your painting, making sure you got the measurements right. So those little dividers come in handy. If you'd like to learn to paint and you're not sure where to start, I've got my own Patreon channel, Paul Anthony Barker. So that's full of real-time painting videos, so you can paint along with them. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, all the information is in the description below. Thanks for watching, and join me next time.